chase. Out on the field at Mile High, Broncos win is our desire. Couple with a break, brew and a friend, bleed orange and blue to the bitter end. Come and join us, DNVR. We are DNVR.
We are DNVR, and we are live from Studio B. The B stands for Bridgewater or Lock. And we are, of course, presented by MSU Denver.
That's a stretch.
No,
Not that we're presented by MSU Denver, but the B for Drew Lock. So
B for Bridgewater or Lock.
yeah, where's
It's the
B?
beginning of the sentence.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, this is the beginning of the podcast, and we are presented by MSU Denver. Check them out, msudenver.edu/online to find all they have to offer. And the best thing about it is that people that attend MSU Denver work twice as many hours as students attending any other Colorado institution. So if you're looking to maintain a full-time job while getting your degree, there's no better place than MSU Denver. And we are here, Mace.
Finally, wait long enough.
Some real frickin' football.
No pads,
Well, so not quite real football.
but real football and real fans on the hill. I mean, forget about anything that happened in practice. The coolest sight of the day was Von Miller coming out of the locker room, gradually moving his way down the field over to the fans. And you can't get close. There are no autographs this year, and where the fans can sit on the hillside stops at a much higher level than before to maintain the distancing between the fans and the players. But Vaughn looks up at the crowd on the hillside, and he starts doing his clap thing. And then everybody starts clapping along. And that was kind of a moment for me where I felt like, okay, we're back. Now, I mean, Joe Ellis, kind of said something interesting yesterday that, they're planning on having full stadiums, but, kind of qualified that by saying, just kind of have to see with everything going on with Delta variant and all that. But that was a moment where you felt like, okay, we're getting close. We're moving on. We're getting past this. Nature is healing, as it were. It's back to normal.
Yeah.
That was the high point of practice.
And it is absolutely great. Now, of course, everyone is chomping at the bit to get this quarterback battle started, get this quarterback battle going. And while, unfortunately, throughout OTAs, we kind of had to deal with Vic Fangio saying it was, 5% of the entire process. And I think while training camp is a much bigger part of the process, day one of training camp is probably the smallest part of that process. But regardless of that, everyone wants to know who had the better day at practice. And Mace, I got to admit, you are the only person I've seen with your take on it. So I want to hear what that is, and I want to hear your reasoning behind it.
I'm going with a push, and I know people are focused on the 2 long touchdown passes that Drew Lock had. Now, on one of them, Vic Fangio pointed out safety kind of pulled up to avoid a collision, so Vic kind of poo-pooed that a little bit, but you had some coverage lapses. I mean, as there's no Jamar Johnson because he's on the COVID-19 list. They're working in some new safeties. I mean, if anything, one thing that struck me is I'm really concerned about the safety depth on this team. You get past Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons, and you're just going to be kind of holding your breath, perhaps. The other thing is Drew had, I think, the best 2 throws today. You could one of the deep balls and then one downfield shot to Jerry Jeudy. I thought it was a little bit behind Jeudy, but Jerry's going to catch that almost every time. Teddy, he was steady Teddy. The thing that was encouraging for Drew today was he didn't have the big mistakes, but he had one play in 7-on-7 where the whistle blew on him, one play in team where the whistle blew on him. He had one play, a little out to Cortland Sutton, where it looked like he didn't read it right, like that he thought Cortland was going one way and Drew threw the other, and Drew was mad at himself. And because we know Drew Lock is not a jerk in any way, shape, or form, he's not going to be upset in that way because of something somebody else did. He's mad himself. So looking at that, I'd say probably He feel that was more on him than on Courtland Sutton. And Teddy had one play where he climbed the pocket really nicely, and Teddy didn't have moments where the whistle blew on him. Teddy looked better, more composed in the pocket. So Drew had the higher level stuff. Teddy was more consistently decent to good, and that's why I go with the push.
Any big mistakes from either guy?
No. And that's where you're encouraged by this. And if this is what they are, you'd go with Drew.
Yeah.
Because of the high level throws. But one thing that was interesting that Drew said after practice, and I think maybe he was probably better prepared, and this is actually a credit to Drew Lock, he said that when he had a bunch of receivers and tight ends working with him over the last few weeks, that they went over the first couple of days of practice. That he knew that you can kind of get the script and figure it out. And so for Drew, this was a day that with guys like Albert O, Noah Fant, and others, that this was not the first rodeo for him. This was something he'd done before. Teddy did get work in down in Miami. It was only with Deontay Spencer and Jerry Jeudy. So certainly I think today, to Drew's credit, but also it's worth noting, I think it was probably a product of Drew being here and working with more guys over the last few weeks than Teddy did being down in South Florida.
And that has to matter, right? Like, there was nothing precluding Teddy from being here and working out with those guys.
Well, except the fact that he's a new father.
Well, right.
I mean,
but
there's not. I mean,
how bad do you want the job?
Well, I mean, you want the job, but you've also got things in your personal life and all that. I mean, I'm not going to ding Teddy for the fact that his work was only with a couple of guys, because he mentioned Spencer and Jeudy, and that Drew had some days with a bunch of guys. And actually, Drew said that part of the work came with Jerry Jeudy as well. So Jerry worked with both Drew and Teddy.
Smart
and I think smart man. Hey, someone's going to be delivering him the ball. And Justin Simmons says he thinks that Jerry can be an All-Pro or a Pro Bowler. He didn't qualify about that by which quarterback. He just said he thinks he can be an All-Pro or Pro Bowler this year.
Well, and I'm not necessarily knocking Teddy for it, but it mattered. Like, if Drew got a head start, he doesn't get handicapped for it. You know what I mean? Like, he has a head start, so Teddy has to catch him in that regard when it comes to chemistry.
And Drew did well what we know he can do well. He pushed it down the field. He was, when he was on his first read, he was decisive and had some good play action executions today. So it was interesting, like today, and another reason why I think I'm calling it a push is because both guys did what we know they can do. It's where do they go beyond that? Where do they step forward? And that's what I mean. Today was probably expository action. If you're kind of going on the scorecard, for me the scorecard was dead even. I know a lot of people disagree and say Drew had the day, but that's, I think, again, if you focus on the high level throws, it's going to be Drew. If you kind of take a step back and looking at the big picture, and also the fact that Teddy had a near deep completion that went right off of Tyree Cleveland's hand, leading him on a post. If Tyree makes that catch, we're saying that Teddy had a deep completion as well, and I can't ignore that. So
all right, quickly, you mentioned Albert O, a couple other guys. What's the injury status of some of these guys?
Albert O looked fine today.
That is, he was a little bit later in the season. Yeah. So that's really great to hear.
It's great to hear. He's young. He's bounced back nicely. Cortland looked fine. I mean, you can see they're going to ease them back, but I was really surprised to see Cortland Sutton out there for some team period reps. Not many, just a handful, but they got him in there. Nice. And the way Cortland talked yesterday about playing one preseason game, you kind of thought, might we be waiting a few days to a week before he's out there with team? But he got there. He got some team reps today, and he got targeted on one play, so that's a good that was a very good sign. We saw Mike Purcell, who we didn't see at all in OTAs, out there working in team period reps as well. That's another good sign going forward. So really, and Bobby Massey was back out there too, although he was with the second team.
Okay,
that's another interesting thing that I think we need to dive into. There's a legit competition at right tackle. And when it comes to probably the beyond quarterback, what is the next most important position battle? That's where it's going to be. Calvin Anderson today. Vic say is going to rotate day by day. So tomorrow that would mean probably Bobby Massey. The question is whether you see Quinn Bailey or Cameron Fleming enter the mix at right tackle. Cameron Fleming today worked behind Garrett Bowles at left tackle. So at right tackle, you saw Calvin Anderson, Massey, Quinn Bailey kind of cleaning it up with a third team. And Anderson there were a couple of plays where he did a good job pulling, creating space. One play that jumped out from Mike Boone in particular. Also, Calvin Anderson got beaten by Von Miller. Von Miller is going to do that to a lot of people.
Yes, he is.
And to Calvin's credit, it didn't lead to a stretch of plays where he went into a funk. He was able to compartmentalize and move on. And with a young guy, that's the number one thing I want to see. You're going to get beaten by a stud. How do you bounce back?
Absolutely.
And he settled himself really nicely. And I asked Vic about Calvin after practice, and the praise that he offered yesterday. He kind of echoed it and talked about the progress that he's made. Garrett Bowles loves him some Calvin Anderson. The two of them spent a lot of time together, room together. So that is actually it's a competition, but I think we expect it to be Massey and Fleming, but this is looking more like this is going to be a Massey and Anderson competition, at least early.
Just to give everyone a little bit of an inside look at what our training camp coverage is going to look like. We're trying to get you from all angles.
Yeah.
We're going to have two people on the ground every single day. Of course, Mason, Zach, and then I will also be getting my days in there out at training camp. And one person is going to write the quarterback scoreboard. That person will not be on the podcast. So you're going to get from Zach Stevens today a detailed report of almost everything that went down between the quarterbacks. And then, of course, after the podcast, Mace will kind of get you covered from some of the other angles of the day. But speaking of Zach Stevens, I want to bring him on now because he, I guess, slightly disagrees with your take on the quarterback competition today. So let's hear what he has to say. Why, Zach, did you have Drew Lock edging out Teddy Bridgewater just a little bit today?
The end zone, guys, and we know how tough that is to get into the end zone for the Broncos recently. And so the fact that he was able to get into the end zone not once but twice was just the thing that put him over the edge in my book. Teddy Bridgewater was better in the pocket. I'm sure that's something that Mace has said already. He looked a lot more comfortable. Drew looked a little frazzled at times in there, but Drew got in the end zone, a deep bomb to Trinity Benson, which was a fantastic catch by Trinity on his part, and he scored. And so Teddy Bridgewater almost had a touchdown, but he was just a little bit off with Tyree Cleveland. Otherwise, he probably would have won the day if that catch would have been made.
Went off his hand, though.
It went off one of his hands. I mean, it would have been a very tough catch. And give credit to Trinity Benson for making that catch for Drew. That was a difficult catch as well.
And that, I think, just illuminates just how close this competition could end up being. If, a couple inches, one guy can make the catch, one guy it's just out of his hands, can kind of swing the day.
And the balls weren't, the passes were in similar places as well. And that's kind of the thing here. I mean, I would say that, like, Drew, one of the passes to Trinity, that was as good as the one that Teddy made to Tyree. One was caught, one is not. And so you kind of have to and that's where we kind of have to look at this competition from an interesting perspective and say, all right, what's their fault? What's on the quarterback? What's on the receiver?
Right.
Yeah.
What's interesting, though, is like in a game, that pass doesn't get completed,
right? And
you punt on that drive versus you do complete that pass, you score a touchdown on that drive, it changes the game.
Fair or not, that's how it's going to go.
Yep.
And that's why.
And same with Drew's other touchdown that he had to Jerry Jeudy. I mean, Jerry Jeudy was wide open, and so Teddy absolutely could have made that pass, but Teddy didn't make that pass. It was Drew that made that pass. So you give credit to Drew, and that's why, guys. I know I want this competition to be called as soon as they know. I don't think that's going to happen even after what Vic said yesterday. So it means we're going to get a lot of time. So it means that the plays that are going off of one hand one day are going to happen for the other guy the next day. They're going to even themselves out, and we'll find out, okay, is Teddy just putting a little more mustard on these passes than Drew is, and actually Drew's throwing it more accurately? Or maybe we'll find out that, boy, today was the outlier with Drew getting those passes and Teddy not getting those passes.
Absolutely. My question for both of you is, we've now seen a lot of quarterbacks in the last 5 years compete at Broncos training camp, some not competing, going all the way back to the battle between Mark Sanchez and Trevor Siemian and Paxton Lynch. The next year it's Paxton Lynch and Trevor Siemian. The next year it's Case Keenum. The next year it's Joe Flacco. Last year it's Drew Lock. How did today's quarterback play compare to some of the other training camp quarterback play you've seen, Zach? And then I'll go.
You sure you want to do this, Ryan? Because we know how Case Keenum looked in training camp.
And
I'll tell you what.
Goat.
I'll tell you what. Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater did not look like Case Keenum. They were not outstanding today. But after the practice, Vic said they were good. And that's exactly what I would say. They were good. And I was thinking about this on my way home today, guys, that Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater, they kept up with the defense enough. The defense didn't dominate today. And what have we seen for many years? We see the defense absolutely dominate the offense for like the first week of practice. And, being optimistic, we're like, well, that just happens. And today, it wasn't the defense absolutely dominating practice. It was a good give and take. The defense certainly won some plays. Von Miller certainly won some plays, but the offense also won some plays. And so that's very encouraging to me at where this offense is and where the quarterback position is.
Yeah, I don't want to get kind of down the first day here, but there was a little bit more of a dynamic presence on the offense than we've seen. And honestly, Jerry Jeudy, if he keeps doing what he did in OTAs and what he did today, he could transform this offense no matter who the quarterback is. And I think, like, to what's been missing, you get to even like 2017, obviously the quarterback play was deficient with Trevor and Paxton. I remember early in camp turning to somebody I've known for a long time and having a conversation and saying, the 2018 quarterback isn't on this field. And he wasn't. In 2018, it's Keenum as Charlie checkdown, taking what's there. There wasn't the same kind of dynamic presence that I feel like Jerry Jeudy alone has brought stepping in there this year. And I think it's less I think there's less a difference in the quarterback position than there is. I feel like there's a real alpha developing in number 10 at wide receiver here that could transform the outlook for this entire offense, really. And the other thing is the offensive line. We were talking about the right right tackle competition, but this O-line is better than it has been too.
Zach, would you concur with that?
Yes, I would agree with that. And, it starts with Garrett Bowles. Garrett Bowles has got to be very, very solid on that left side so that they can do something that they haven't done and just swing protections all the way to the right side and help with that right side, because right now, looks like Calvin Anderson is that first guy, which I know everyone on our podcast loves to see, but we're going to see how this plays out, because it would be something if Calvin Anderson wins this over two guys that they signed this offseason that are making $4 million. Maybe George Payton isn't the biggest Calvin Anderson guy, but we know from everything that Vic Fangio has said, he seems to really like Calvin, and that's going to be big. If they can get solid play, just solid play out of right tackle, then the rest of the line should take care of itself.
Did you happen to see Calvin Anderson's hype video that he sent out?
Oh, no. When was that? Today?
The day before the media barbecue. He put out like this video of him. He's like walking through the city in like some dimmed tones. And he's got like clips from different like media sources talking about him. It's quite inspiring.
Oh man, I mean, if he takes off and becomes like a good starter, his social media is going to absolutely blow up. There's no question about that. I mean, you're going to see him maybe be the most popular offensive lineman on Twitter if he can get a big contract one day.
Love to hear it. All right, Zach, we are going to let you get back to writing the scoreboard, and very much looking forward to seeing what the score comes out to be. Of course, if you want to read the scoreboard, head over to thednvr.com, where you'll get all of our training camp coverage on top of what we're doing here on YouTube. Of course, if you become a DNVR member, you can also do so much more. We will let you go, Zach, so you can get back to that, and like I said, we'll be looking forward to seeing what the score is.
Right on. See you, fellas.
Like I said, Mace, we will be covering training camp from top to bottom over on the DNVR.com. We've got new T-shirts coming. Of course, when you sign up to be a member at the DNVR.com, you can get a code for a free T-shirt. You can also come down here to the DNVR bar and get member-sized beers. By the way, this weekend, we've got the grand opening 2.0 coming. Everyone knows our first grand opening was sadly very much dimmed by COVID-19. So we've got a much bigger party planned this time. So much fun stuff going on down here. And again, you're not going to want to miss out on Quarterback Scoreboard, as each day we'll be kind of alternating between Zach and May, so we can and they'll kind of come together on a score. Maybe it's in between where they are. Maybe there'll be a consensus on the score. Regardless, I very much predict that the scoreboard will predict the winner of this. We will not be on the wrong side of it.
Well, I can tell you this, when I'll just give you a preview of what's coming. We slightly differed, and the scoreboard is going to kind of reflect being in between.
The middle.
Yes.
That's the way it should be, and that's the way Zach and I did it last time, because Zach and I would have some like long spirited debates about who won the last quarterback competition we covered, and we finally just ended up realizing it's probably easier to just split the difference. And then again, the scoreboard still bore out who was the best. Yeah.
Let's see how that goes over the next few weeks. Also, I want to tell you about our partnership with Ball, and that is, of course, as in Ball Arena, but also as in the aerospace technology company and as in the world's largest aluminum can and packaging manufacturer. Speaking of aluminum cans right here, Ball has been leading global sustainability efforts for decades. In 2018 and 2019, Ball Aerospace developed image surveillance systems to observe natural resources from space and methane, ozone, even land and water use. Ball's ASI, which is their aluminum stewardship initiative certification, makes it a leader in the stewardship of aluminum while meeting the highest environmental, ethical, and social standards within their market value chain. By 2030, Ball aims to reduce operational carbon emissions by 55% and across their value chain by 16% from 2017 levels. And guess what? They are looking for help right here in the Denver area at their plant in Golden. They have 4 manufacturing positions for production technicians and other roles available.
Is that so?
It is, because they need to make more cans. In 2020, Ball made over 101 billion cans. That's billion with a B.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's a lot of cans, and we're using one of the cans here right now in the DNVR studio. They're hiring production techs to make even more aluminum beverage cans, adding line capacity to their 400-person plant right over in Golden. The demand for sustainable aluminum beverage cans is greater than ever, and more than that, chances are, like I said, if you've consumed a beverage in a can, it's been from a Ball aluminum can. We got some of those Ball aluminum cans used for Breck Brews, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Right here at the DNVR bar. So the good thing about aluminum is this: 75% of all aluminum that's ever been produced in the history of mankind on this earth, it's still in use. It is infinitely recyclable. So they can just keep doing it over and over and over again. That can that you're drinking out of, that aluminum is probably being used time and time and time again. That's the cool thing about aluminum. And you can help Ball do that by joining their workforce right now. Like I said, they're looking for people to join them at their plant in Golden. Text Golden to 77222, and you'll be linked to open positions. You can also go directly to jobs.ball.com, search for Golden. That's jobs.ball.com, search for Golden, or simply text Golden to 77222. Be unstoppable at Ball.
All right, I also want to tell you about our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook, where you can turn $1 into $100 just if an American medals. And as we know, Americans are getting on the medal stand every single day at the Olympics. So bet $1 for new users and turn it into $100 as soon as an American wins a medal. And you probably don't even have to wait for it because so many Americans have already medaled. So it's free $100 when you sign up at DraftKings Sportsbook. And of course, you can always get a sign-up bonus up to $1,000 when you use the code DNVR at DraftKings Sportsbook when you sign up. Of course, for that, you must be 21 or older, Colorado only. The bonus is comprised of a first deposit bonus and a first bet match, each up to $500. The deposit bonus requires a 25x playthrough, and restrictions do apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700.
That's impressive that you got through it so quickly.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Mace, let's dive into your notebook here. What else was notable today? What else did you find interesting? Who stood out? Any rookies? I guess we'll start there. Any rookies that stood out to you today?
Pat Surtain, no one's surprise, is playing well. But what's interesting is how they're working him around. There, even some packages were kind of trying him. Remember Sua Cravens 3 years ago?
Yes.
Trying to have him be that hybrid. Clearly, with Pat Surtain, there are two things going on. Number one, Fangio wants to use more dime packages because that's the way the league is going in terms of pass intensive, being stout on the back end, having a lot of speed on the back end. Number two, Surtain is playing at a high enough level where he's basically saying, all right, I need to be on the field. Now, Ron Darby had a good day today.
Okay.
Kyle Fuller, I thought, played well today. Bryce Callahan, a play that Jerry Jeudy made where, to his credit, Teddy Bridgewater kind of got it up and got it to where only Jeudy could get. It was a leaping catch. Teddy had to place it there because Bryce Callahan was on Jerry Judy's hip, tightly on him. And that's an impressive throw, an impressive catch, the kind of thing that you get from two guys who really are on the same page chemistry-wise. But you can't fault Bryce Callahan because he was right there step for step with Jerry Jeudy. So things are going well at corner. I mentioned Von Miller making a play off the edge against Calvin Anderson. What was interesting is also Malik Reed was right there. He would have been positioned for a sack as well. Reed got multiple pressures in the day. They're still working kind of Bradley Chubb back to kind of full tilt. So we're seeing a lot of Malik Reed at this point. On the offensive side, mentioning Jerry Jeudy, Trinity Benson had a good day from down the depth chart with some downfield catches. And another rookie I want to mention, and he's below the radar, undrafted, but he made a very nice play on the ball on a pass in this practice, and that was Mac McCain out of North Carolina A&T.
Okay.
And number 49 was a little bit out of position on one of the touchdowns conceded, but keep your eye on him because he looks like he's got some really quick instincts. Reacts quickly to the ball, can make plays on the ball early. So we're going to see some ups and downs, but maybe Mac McCain, you start thinking about him as a potential practice squad guy, especially because the practice squads, once again, are going to be expanded this year as they were last year.
Obviously, running backs are hard to judge at all in training camp, and especially before they put the pads on. Mm-hmm. One thing I would just ask is the one thing I can sometimes notice with those guys and just anyone out there is foot frequency. Did Javonte Williams look like the explosive guy that we're kind of expecting him to be?
He looked explosive. Mike Boone did too.
Mm.
And for Mike Boone, it was picking up where he left off in OTAs. The thing I like about Boone in particular is how decisive his cuts are. Bobby Turner, remember when he was here, longtime Bronco running back coach?
Yes.
The thing that Bobby used to preach to his guys over and over was one cut and go.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby T would really like Mike Boone.
Love that.
Yeah.
Mike Boone, Mike Boone's one of those guys, and there's a few guys like this throughout history where every time they get an opportunity, they shine.
Yeah.
And you just wonder, why is this guy not getting more opportunities? I wonder if that's what we're going to end up saying about him, when he does get out there on the field.
It's very possible. And it was I'm just interesting to go back and watch him in Minnesota. When he got opportunities, this guy could average 5 yards a carry. I think it was in the Saints game last year that I went back and watched, and he's got some real explosion to him. So you're pretty psyched about the depth at running back. Royce Freeman actually had a couple of nice runs today as well, and he had some sharp cuts. But he's kind of that forgotten man. You almost wonder if Royce is effectively auditioning for the other 31 teams, and if somebody would rather trade for a running back and give up a conditional pick rather than seeing if he's available on the waiver wire. Maybe that's how this plays out for Royce Freeman. The other thing that could happen is one of the top three backs could get hurt. Yep. And then that would set up a spot.
Touch wood.
Yeah, this is
that's wooden enough.
Particle board, right?
I think so.
That'll do.
It's got some wood in it.
Yeah.
All right, I'll just kind of name some other names here. Noah Fant is a name that I haven't heard mentioned too much.
Tight ends weren't really active today, at least not Noah Fant. Eric Saubert's making some plays.
Oh.
They got Austin Fort involved in the flat as well, and you just hope with Austin Fort that the dude can stay healthy.
Yep.
Because he's 0 for 2 on making it through camps. But he's good enough if he can stay healthy. But Saubert, and I asked Vic about him after practice, he's going to make this team. Because, for one thing, he's a better blocker than Noah Fant and Albert O are at this point. Sorry about the Tecmo sound effect there. By the way, that's a
Bo Jackson calling you?
it should be, yeah. Bo Jackson or QB Eagles from back in the day.
Yes.
But yeah, now I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. Well, we were
okay.
talking about tight ends.
Yeah, Salbert.
Better blocker.
Yes, but the interesting thing with him, Wade Harmon, of course, the Broncos tight end coach, came from the Falcons, coached him down in Atlanta. Salbert was the year of kind of the off the radar tight end. Do you remember the Bears used a second round pick on a tight end from like a Division II school?
Adam Shaheen?
Adam Shaheen, right. And I believe that it was the same year that Eric Salbert came out of Drake. Drake is infamous in Colorado Buffalo's football history.
Yes, you had to do that, didn't you?
Well, sorry, but more infamous for the late Chuck Fairbanks in
Fairbanks,
particular, doomed by Drake. Drake is a non-scholarship FCS program. They're in the Pioneer League. So Salbert basically coming from completely.
Bulldogs?
Yes, very good. Well, they've had a decent basketball team.
Yep.
Our own Cale Sorbo is a Drake
He sure is.
alumnus. So he had a huge learning curve coming into the league. Actually, and this is where I admit sometimes your biases coming into a draft can kind of rear back. 4 years later, I'm thinking back to seeing some astounding film of Salbert at a pretty low level there in the Pioneer Football League.
Mm-hmm.
And saying, well, if you give him some time and he can kind of find his sea legs, he can develop. And today, seeing some of the outstretched catches that he was making, seeing how crisp he was, I'm like, okay, this is the guy that I thought had some real high-level potential if he'd get in the right spot. So that's another good sign as well, because you have Albert O getting healthy, Noah Fant, you can rely on him. And if Eric Salbert's in there, and if he's the best blocker in that room, he's going to get snaps. But it's nice to know that he can make plays with the football as well. That looks like a little bit of an upgrade from what the Broncos had on the back end of that tight end depth chart last year.
Anything else top of mind that we haven't covered yet?
Oh gosh, let's see. We got Surtain. I got the Mac McCain mention in there. I mentioned Mike Purcell. We saw Shamar Stephen rotating in liberally with the defensive line. Deshaun Williams also getting some, depending on the package, getting run with the ones as well. Talked about the right tackle position. Garrett Bowles was effusive in praising how far Lloyd Cushenberry has come from year to year. He said the thing with Lloyd is that he's playing more than thinking.
Yep.
And last year he was thinking a lot, and now he's playing, he's reacting quicker, and is kind of taking over as that quarterback of the offensive line.
It's great to hear.
It's great to hear. It's not great to hear if you thought there was going to be a competition between Lloyd Cushenberry and Quinn Miners. I didn't either. I think people got caught up in the storyline of the gut.
They like Miners, yeah.
And I like Miners long-term as well, but he is coming from Division III, and he didn't play at all last year. He basically had 1 week in the Senior Bowl in January, and that was it. The most logical outcome for Quinn Miners this year is redshirt year.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Totally.
See where he is next year. But Cushenberry looks really steady. And that's what you want. You want steady. Center is not something where you're saying, man, that guy is spectacular. You want somebody who's commanding the group.
I wouldn't be surprised if late in training camp, Quinn Miners has a hamstring injury and he ends up on IR.
When I was growing up, Washington used to do that with their quarterbacks.
Uh-huh.
Every year they'd take like a Jay Schrader or a Mark Rippon or a Stan Gelbaugh, who played with the Chargers, for familiar names for our older listeners, and there'd be a hamstring or a foot problem, and eventually they started having independent people review that.
This,
but
yeah.
that was the Joe Gibbs thing back in the 80s. I'm going to take a quarterback on day 3, develop him, but I'm stashing him. But yeah, would that surprise me? No.
Oh, yeah.
But there probably will be some scintilla of a legitimate injury if that's what happens.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's a little injured by the end of training camp.
Did you see also from the pictures that the offensive linemen some of them are wearing kind of extra protection on their
Yeah,
heads.
is that just why get a concussion in practice or why bang your head at all in practice?
Basically, and you start trying some things out as well. I mean, maybe this is something that's going to take root on a larger level. We've actually seen some college programs. I know Virginia Tech, North Carolina, Wake Forest have sometimes put extra padding on the helmets of players, but put sensors in there. No sensors here, but we've kind of gotten some evidence that this sort of thing can help.
Awesome. All right, well, I think that's going to wrap up the live side of things. Yeah. If you're watching live, make sure you hit us with a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe because we are going to be doing this every single day. Tomorrow it'll be Zach who comes in and gives his impressions of practice while Mace will write the quarterback scoreboard, and we'll just keep rotating that in. I'll be at practice on Friday, hopefully a couple more times next week, working with the Broncos on the COVID protocols and how many media members they're able to let in on the facility. So stay tuned with us. And we'll be having you covered all the way through training camp. But again, on the live side, that's going to wrap it up. We are flipping over to the podcast side where we'll answer all of your questions. So if you want your questions answered, of course, you can jump over onto thednvr.com, leave your comment on the most recent podcast, and we will read that as we finish up. Again, that's going to wrap it up for us today. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.